So here's the thing. Whenever I talk about new transport projects for London, there is always someone in the comments complaining about it. Why does London get all the investment in rail while schemes elsewhere get scrapped or can't even get off the ground? I mean, seriously, the ground under London looks like a sponge at this point. It's a very fair question. I totally get why people feel a bit left by the wayside. There are lots of possible answers. London is far larger and more populous than any other city in the UK. It's one of the major financial centres of the world. It generates a surplus that provides for the rest of the country. But none of this really cuts to the heart of the matter. So what I'm going to do is present you with a little case study which I hope will explain why this happens. I'll try to keep my personal opinions out of it. Actually no, I will give you my personal opinions, but at the end. The case study I'm going to give you is Canary Wharf. I mean, isn't that the perfect example? It has the Docklands Light Railway, the Jubilee Line extension, and the Elizabeth Line, three major transport projects of the last 40 years. The Docklands Light Railway, or the DLR as it calls itself to look cool in front of its friends, was built in the 80s to assist in the regeneration of the then depressed Docklands. At that time, the Docklands was not the major business centre it is today. And, this is the key here, no one expected it to be. Transport links were abysmal. There were plenty of railways, but they were mostly disused with a few dilapidated lines hanging on. The transport situation was so bad that residents of the Isle of Dogs declared independence in 1970, although it should be said that transport was just one of a number of grievances they had. Originally, the hope was for a tube line. In 1965, a project known as the Fleet Line was proposed. This was supposed to run from Stanmore to Fenchurch Street. From there on, it would run into southeast London, possibly via the Docklands. But by 1979, when the first stage of this finally opened as the Jubilee Line, people were less keen on a tube line to the docks. It would be expensive, and what would be the point? There would never be enough commuters to justify such a thing. So instead, the DLR was built. This was a light rail system which seemed terribly exciting and modern when it opened in 1987, but that masked the fact that it had been built on the cheap. £77 million as compared to the estimated £400 million for a tube line. It recycled a lot of existing rail alignments and infrastructure. Its city terminus was at Tower Gateway, unconnected to either British Rail or the Underground, and just outside the financial district. Still, the DLR was envisioned as a local railway that would be serving low-rise flats and light industry. It's not like the Docklands were, you know, a major commercial centre or anything, all, like, full of skyscrapers or whatever. Yet even as the rails were being laid, something was stirring on the Isle of Dogs. A consortium of investors were not content to let sleeping dogs lie. They saw the abandoned West India docks as having potential for a vast commercial development, far beyond the scope of what the government had been hoping for from the regeneration process. There would be offices, restaurants, shopping centres, skyscrapers. In short, a second city. This was Canary Wharf. But Olympia and York, the company behind the development, recognised that they would need better rail links. As early as 1986, they were pushing for a link on the DLR to Bank, which they got in 1991. Canary Wharf station, mostly complete at that point, had to be demolished and rebuilt on a larger scale. This, incidentally, caused a weird situation for a while, where the automatic trains would stop for a station that didn't exist. Soon, Olympia and York were pushing for more. They wanted a tube line of their very own, from Canary Wharf to Waterloo. Originally this would have been a separate thing, but London Transport were able to bargain with Olympia and York to get that Fleet/Jubilee line extension into southeast London built. The line the developers wanted, and partially paid for, would necessitate the abandonment of the Jubilee line platforms at Charing Cross. Instead of terminating at Lewisham or Thamesmead as originally proposed, it would terminate at Stratford. The Jubilee line extension opened in 1999. This partnership between commercial and public interests would also be responsible for the Northern Line extension to Battersea Power Station, which opened in 2021. Once again, this was partly paid for by the developers, who insisted in exchange that the already small amount of affordable housing they provide be reduced to 9% of the development. You know, a less objective reporter might call this a pretty scummy move. That brings us up to 2022 and the opening of the Elizabeth line. This wasn't originally supposed to go to Canary Wharf. That bit was added to the plans in the 2000s, by which time Canary Wharf was firmly established, and in need of a direct connection to the city and the West End. Since the 1980s, Canary Wharf had gone from a run-down post-industrial urban landscape to, as some commentators have dubbed it, Manhattan-on-Thames. In transport terms, it had gone from barely justifying a light railway to needing a main line connection. The key here is money. The two biggest transport connections to Canary Wharf were not built for the residents, but for commercial interests. Indeed, the commercial interests on the Isle of Dogs have been something of a sore point for many residents. In fairness, I should also point out that businesses contributed significant funds towards the construction of both the Jubilee and Elizabeth lines. It's not all public money. But when you look at other major rail projects purely based in London, they've tended to be much smaller scale. The extensions of the DLR, the Overground, the tram link, they have for the most part been lightly engineered or based around renewing or replacing existing railways. Not dissimilar, in fact, to projects like the Manchester Metro link or Newcastle Metro. I have one shot of the Newcastle Metro and you can be sure I'm going to use it. Even the Victoria line was a compromise. It was supposed to be much longer, and before that it was supposed to be part of a whole network of post-war railways. Had the overcrowding situation on the other lines not been absolutely desperate, we probably wouldn't even have the line we do. So that's the truth of the matter with regard to London seemingly getting priority on rail. It's all about money and the people who have it. Now I'm going to indulge myself and tell you my opinion. I don't know if it comes across in my videos, but I'm a little bit pro-rail. It generates economic benefits, that's why businesses are willing to open their wallets to get a rail connection. And I believe that railways are very much one of those if you build it they will come things. Look at the aforementioned Manchester Metro link, look at the Romford to Upminster line, look at the Croydon trams. All of them demonstrate the value of investment both to the railways themselves and to the places that they serve. I believe that investing in rail is, as our transatlantic cousins would put it, a no-brainer. Any government that is serious about improving the country outside of London and the South East really needs to start laying more rails. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do click the like button and consider subscribing for more. I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon. You are the injection of commercial cash to my speculative rail plan. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.